I want to speak to you today about 3 commitments for 2014. And I really want you to pay attention to this because a lot of times we make resolutions, but in our resolutions, they don't last very long, and many of us, because we don't keep them very well, we just kind of pass the resolutions along. But I don't want you to make a resolution. I want you to make a commitment. 3 commitments that I'm going to bring to you today that's within the ability of every single person here to be able to bring. Now let me read to you Psalm 139, starting in verse 23. Search me, O God, and know my heart. Try me and know my thoughts, and see if there be any wicked way in me, and lead me in the way of life everlasting. Now, I'm sure that many of you had, like most of us do, if I were to say to you how many of you kept your resolution from last year, maybe I should start even sooner than that, how many of you know what your resolution was in 2013 when it rolled around? Anybody know that? I know exactly what mine was. I was going to lose weight, and I was going to, what else was I going to do? Exercise. I was going to exercise. And many of you, you don't have to think about it either because you've had the same resolutions, and they last till somewhere around February if you're really fortunate. For some, it lasts just a couple of weeks. But the bottom line is that resolutions aren't really all that great, but commitments are something else. You made a commitment when you got married that you'd be true to each other. You made a commitment to the Lord Jesus Christ when you trusted Him as your personal Lord and Savior, that you would live for Him and that your life would be His. Those were commitments that you made. And there are many other commitments that people make where they're going on in life, but I want to talk to you about some resolutions, some commitments that if you'll keep them, they will significantly change your life. Let me say that again. These 3 commitments that I'm talking about this morning, if you will follow through with them, they will change your life. I happen to know that every single one of us that are sitting here have some things that are very heavy on our hearts. I know I do. And I'm sure that each and every one of you have things that 2014 is going to bring to you heavy on your hearts. I want to turn your thoughts and your mind in that direction. I want you to think about what you're hoping is going to be different in 2014. And I'm saying that to you because I want you to really ponder that. But as I give to you these 3 different commitments that I'm in hopes you'll make, I bet not one of these is on your list. And yet I'm going to tell you that these are 3 commitments that every person, no matter who they are, no matter what they're going through, they need to make these commitments. Now, I can say that without any confusion whatsoever because I know we're all very human. And we all have things that happen to us. We're really not all that different. There are people that are sitting here today that are hurting very deeply. Not because of a death, not because of something like that we would look at and say, well, that's understandable. But they're hurting deeply because of pain that's in their life, that somebody did something to them. Can I tell you that everybody in here could raise their hand on that? There's nobody in here that doesn't have somebody that has hurt them in one way or another. And that's the amazing thing about love. People that you have decided, and I want to emphasize that, you have decided that you will love. They have a greater capacity to hurt you than anybody else does because you care about them. You care about what they think about you. You care about how they look at you. And those things are very important to you in your life. Well, let me get into this. Point number 1. Commit yourself to forget your failures. Commit yourself to forget your failures. Now let me gather your attention to me. There's not a person in here that hasn't failed in 2013. Not one. Let me even change that. There's not a person listening to me now, whether it's by television, radio, or any of the other medias that we have, not a person that's listening to me now that has not significantly, that is, there's been a major thing in your life that you failed at. Then there are those who just want to believe that they never failed and they lie to themselves. Everybody fails, folks. And you failed. Now, I want to read something to you that I think will really help you here because I want you to see that this is more than just an outline that I'm following. Paul's giving this advice as he writes to the church at Philippi. And here's what he says to them. In Philippians chapter 3, starting in verse 13. Brethren, I count not myself to have apprehended. That is, let me rephrase that. I don't claim to be perfect yet. Now, I know the theologians are sitting out there and they're saying, wait a minute now, they trusted Christ as their Savior, all their sin has been forgiven, they're perfect. I know in that sense it's true. But there's another sense that we all relate with. As long as you're in these bodies, every day of your life you sin. Every day of your life you sin as long as you're in this body, even though you're forgiven about all the sins that are there. He goes on to say, brethren, I count not myself to have apprehended. I'm not perfect, but this one thing I do, forgetting those things which are behind, forgetting the failures that I lived through in 2013. He says, I'm putting those things away. I'm not going to remember them anymore. And I'm going to reach forth unto those things which are before. I press toward the mark for the prize of the high calling of God in Christ Jesus. That's advice from God. And that's advice that's still good today. It has stood the test of time. And I know that there are many more relevant and practical, there's no more relevant and practical advice that could be given than you've got to put your failures of the past in the background. Now, I want to get into a little bit of that because sometimes we fail to realize what's happened to us. If you're an individual that feels like you're living a life of failure, the motivation of that life for failure could be a whole lot of things. But we don't have to live imprisoned by failures of the past. And there are people that are living, they're locked up in Satan's jail because he won't let them forget of their failures that have gone on in the past. And we drag them with us along like a big chain hanging around our neck. We just take them with us wherever we go. And when anything good happens to us, he wants to take us back to that failed marriage. He wants to take us back to that failed time in our life, that one thing that we should have done and didn't do, that one thing that we shouldn't have done that we did do. And he says, you're going to have that around your neck the rest of your life. And everybody that looks at you, they think about those terrible things in your life. Does that describe you at all? Dragging a chain around your neck. Now listen to me. All of us have failed in one way or another in our lives this past year. What was your big failure? What's the major thing you messed up on this past year? You know, probably you won't see your failures recorded on TV like it is for celebrities. When they blow it, when they get a divorce, when they've done something wrong, there it is, right on the front page. There it is. They're going to be blowing it out of proportion on Fox News or on CBS or MSNBC or one of those places. Your name's going to be out there and you're going to have all kinds of problems. But you know what I've discovered? We may not be that famous where everybody in the world cares about what's going on in our lives, but I've learned this. Our failures are recorded in our hearts and in our minds. They are indelibly impressed upon our brains so that Satan, when he wants to, can bring it back and flash it up before our eyes and say, don't try to move forward. You failed. You messed up. You blew it. And nobody wants to listen to you. For many of us, our failures are painful memories. They plague us in our dreams. And maybe for you, it's a memory of how you failed in a relationship. You made the wrong decisions. You said the wrong things. The relationship ended. And you look in the mirror and you blame yourself. It may not have happened in this past year. It may have been a long time ago in your life. One of the reasons that I love to hear us say in our church, if you're divorced, you're welcome here. We love divorcees, and we'll find a place for you in our church. And I love to say that because I know one of the things that oftentimes goes along with divorce is that people want to beat you down with it. They may not even say that, and they may not even bring that about in your life, but for some reason it's there. Oh, for certain, the Bible teaches that there are certain things about divorce that we cannot accept. But we can always accept the divorcee. That's just one thing. There are many, many things that could be mentioned, but you need to come to grips in your own life where you're coming to this place where you're going to forgive yourself and allow yourself to be forgiven, because that's what we're talking about when we're talking about failures. Some of you, it may very well be that you failed in a relationship with a mom or a dad. Those are tough. I know one guy in particular who, when his father died, he said he felt free. I said, wow, I'm not sure that I understand it. What do you mean? And he said, I never could please my dad. No matter what accomplishments were in my life, my dad always looked down on me unless I succeeded in this one area of life. And I never succeeded in that area of life, and so my dad was always down on me. Now listen to me. If that describes you, then you need to realize that you can be forgiven and you can put this failure in the past where it'll never come up again. I'm going to show you how before we get done with this message. Some of you, it's not just parents, but sometimes it's the reverse. It's moms and dads that are grieving over their own children. Christmas time, New Year's, we all think about family, don't we? We spent Friday and Saturday with my son and his family and Rob and the girls, and we went up to Louisville. They were playing, Sierra was playing in some kind of a basketball championship thing. I'm not sure just what it was, but we enjoyed going and being with them and celebrating time together and enjoying each other's company and laughing like crazy about all kinds of things and reminiscing and looking at old pictures and doing all the things that families do when they get together. And many of you did the very same thing. But some of you, Christmas is a lonely time. And the reason Christmas is a lonely time is because you've really hurt your mom and your dad, and you're not willing to get this taken care of. Now, listen to me. It is within your power no matter what has gone on. It is within your power no matter what has gone on and failures in your life to correct them. What does God's Word say about what we must do to allow ourselves not to be bogged down by our own past failures? First of all, we don't have to dwell on the past. And I don't think we probably need to dwell on the past anyhow. So it stops us from moving forward into the future that God has for us. Do you know God says an amazing thing in His Word about the sins, about all of the sins in our life? He says, I have separated them as far as the east is from the west, to be remembered no more. Now, God can't forget. God chooses to put them aside, to put them in a place where they're not going to be effective about anybody or anything in any way. God says, I am willing to do that, and I want to do that because I know I can't use you and I can't bless you to the degree that I want to until the failures of the past are dealt with and put aside. I hope I don't sound angry when I do all of this, but I want you to know that when you prepare messages like this particular message I'm preaching, this applies to me probably more than anybody in here. I think that the start of the new year is a good time for us to arise to this challenge, for us to make a decision. By the help of God, we're going to forget our past. Past is past, we're going to put it there and we're going to leave it there, and we're not going to bring it up anymore. I'm going to stop torturing myself about what I did do or what I didn't do. I'm not going to allow Satan to use this to beat my life down. And 2014 is a real good time to stop being chained. I want you to get a vision of that in your mind. Chained to the past. Carrying around these big old heavy chain links that are hanging around your neck, and everywhere you go, they slow you down. Everywhere they go, they capture you and put you down. And you're going to find out how to get rid of those chains that Satan wants to put around your neck. When we've received Christ's forgiveness, it allows us to forgive others. And this is a transition into this very next point that I want to get into. You got to start with forgetting your failures. Forgetting your failures. Here's the second commitment I'd love to see everybody listening to me make for 2014. It's a hard one. It's very difficult. It is commit yourself to forgive. Now, let me gather your thoughts again here because I want to make sure that we're all on the same page. There's nobody in here. There isn't a person listening to me now, not only in this auditorium this morning, but in the other avenues of communication that we use to bring the gospel out. There is nobody listening to me right now who does not need to be forgiven and who does not need to forgive. It's a two-way street. Turn over to Colossians chapter 3, something that I want to read to you there because I want you to listen to the words of this book of Colossians. It shows a significant turning place in our lives. It shows us something that most of us want to bury deep in our lives. We don't want to bring these things up. But they affect every area of our life. They affect everything about us. And in Colossians chapter 3 and verse 13, I want to read this to you. Forbearing one another, forgiving one another. If any man has a quarrel against any, even as Christ forgave you, you need to do the same thing to them. Now, I'm going to kind of change this around a little bit because I want it to be in language that we really do understand. Here's what he's talking about. He's talking about giving up grudges. Giving up grudges. Let me give you a definition of what a grudge is. A grudge is an unforgiving spirit that leads to unforgiving attitudes and unforgiving actions. Now, I want to read that to you again. What we're looking at is what a grudge is. When he says forgive each other, that's what he's talking about, grudges. It's an unforgiving spirit that leads to an unforgiving attitude with unforgiving actions in your life. See, one of the things that you can find out without anybody ever telling you whether you have forgiven someone or not, it's very fundamental, very basic, and we all need to know this, is that you want no harm to come to the individual that you had a grudge against. Now, that can really help you right now. Let me say it again. You can forgive the person that you have a grudge against, and when you really and truly forgive them, you don't want to see any harm coming to them. Now, let's reverse this and see if there's anything there, because it's probably already happened. Is there all of a sudden a face in your mind? You got a grudge against them. It can be a relative. It can be a mom or a dad. It can be a former spouse. It can be a current spouse. It can be anybody. There they are. They rob you of sleep. They rob you of peace. They rob you of every single thing in your life. Harboring a grudge is about nursing dislike for someone. What you need to know is that grudges are dangerous. Do you know why they're dangerous? They're destructive. Grudges are destructive. They're destructive in every area that you can imagine. When you're a person who's holding a grudge, it can destroy your marriage. Did you know that? Whether you divorce or not, it can destroy your marriage if you have a grudge against your spouse. Grudges have broken up families. I could call out by name right now people that I know in families that will have nothing to do with another family member because they're harboring a grudge in their heart about something that was done a long time ago. They can't get over it. Grudges ruin friendships. Did you know that? They do. And grudges split churches. Did you know that? Unforgiving spirits fester underneath the population of the church and destroys a church because somebody won't give up a grudge. And today, if you know that you're holding a grudge against someone, then God has something that He wants to say to you. Give it up. Get rid of it. Maybe you need to come up here and make an altar out of these steps and just say, I'm putting it right here. Maybe you need to get out and talk with your wife or talk with a loved one or talk to a confidant in one way or another, and you're getting rid of this. You're not letting this harbor in your life anymore. God says, vengeance is mine, I will repay, saith the Lord. He didn't equip us to do that kind of stuff. I want to remind you that grudges are not just destructive. Listen to me. They are self-destructive. When you hold a grudge against someone, you're going to hurt yourself as much and perhaps even more than you're going to hurt the person that you're holding the grudge against. Several years ago, I don't know if you remember this or not, I'm going to tell you that this, when I say several years, I think that this was somewhere back in the early 2000s or late 1900s, 1999, something like that. It was a tragic example of what I'm talking about, destructive grudges in some people's lives. And I don't know if you remember, but a man was killed by a parcel bomb. Somebody sent a bomb to his address, fixed it up so that when he opened it, it would blow up, and it did, blew his head off. And the man was killed by that parcel bomb, and later on that month, a couple, a man and a woman, committed suicide. And they left a note. And in that note, it turned out that they were responsible for the bomb that was mailed to this guy that killed him. And you won't be able to believe this, but do you know why they sent a bomb to this guy, this couple? Because he did something to them when they were in high school. It stayed there all those years. Does it bring back any memories to you when you think of high school? Were you beat up? Was there a bully there that, I remember, this is a long, long time ago, and I don't want to get into a lot of this, but I was going to Norwood High School in Cincinnati, suburb of Cincinnati. That's where all the hillbillies went to, was there. We lived there. And I remember that when I was in school one day, I'd gotten in trouble and had dropped out of school. And they talked me into going back to school, and I'll never forget it as long as I live. The principal sitting down, and he looked at me and pointed his finger at me, and he said, one mess up, and you're out of here for good. Period. One mess up. Well, I didn't want to mess up. I didn't want to fail. And sure enough, I don't think it was even, it might have been the next day, but I think it was the same day. I went into English class. I had electric vocational all day long, but I had one English class I had to take. And when I went into that English class, I sat down, didn't know anybody in that classroom, and when I sat down in the seat, this guy behind me, turns out he was the captain of the football team, he started kicking my seat. Just kicking it. And I turned around and I said, you got a problem? He said, yeah, you're my problem. I said, we can settle this outside if you want to. He said, let's go. And the teacher came and broke it up. Now, I got to tell you, with everything in me, I wanted to hit him. I wanted to double up my fist and punch him and get vengeance. That's what I wanted to do. And the whole time in my mind, I can see that principal saying, mess up one time. Guess whose fault it would have been? No matter what happened, guess whose fault it would have been? Mine. Isn't that strange that I still remember that? I couldn't even tell you the guy's name. I can't tell you the teacher's name. I just remember he was kicking the back of my seat, and it made me mad. Who's been kicking the back of your seat? Who is it, by the mention of their name, causes things to happen inside of you that you know are bad? You need to get rid of that. And you can get rid of that. Make no mistake about it. If you keep harboring a grudge, it will eventually destroy you. If not physically, it'll destroy you emotionally and spiritually. It'll make you a bitter and twisted person. It will. The book of Job in chapter 21 describes people who have no happiness at all, and they live and die with bitter hearts. You ought to read that chapter sometime. Do you really want to have an epitaph that is put for you that this was a bitter person? Do you remember that parable where Jesus told about the servant who had forgiven a huge debt to someone? And then he refused to forgive someone else a very tiny amount. He was forgiven the millions of dollars in debt that he had, but a guy that owed him $1, he wouldn't forgive it, and he had him thrown into prison. You remember that story in the Bible? Max Lucado, he makes this interesting comment in one of his books about that. Listen to what he says. Unforgiving servants always end up in prison. Unforgiving servants always end up in prison. Prisons of anger. Prisons of guilt. Prisons of depression. God says to you in His Word, don't sentence yourself to prison. Don't do it. Set yourself free. Give up your grudges. Forgive each other whatever grievances you may have against one another. And according to God's Word, the way to give up a grudge is to forgive the grievance. Notice what God says here. He isn't asking you to ignore whatever the person has done to you. He's not asking you to ignore that. He isn't asking you to pretend that it didn't happen. He doesn't even ask you to condone it or pretend it didn't happen or that it doesn't matter. What God asks you to do, listen to me. He asks you to forgive the wrong that was done to you. Now, I know that I can hear someone out there who's saying, okay, then I'm going to make this commitment right now. I know the invitation hasn't been given, but I'm responding right now, and here's how I'm responding. If that person that's really hurt me, if they will ask me to forgive them, then I'll forgive them. No. You're falling into a trap of the devil. Whether they ever ask you to forgive them or not, you're to forgive them. That's what the Bible teaches. The Bible says, then when they do come to you, if they ever do come to you, you're already free. It's not uncommon for someone when they're approached like that and they say, I want to forgive you the grudge that I had against you and what you did to me, and I forgive you now. And they look and say, I don't know what you're talking about. Man, I put that away a long time ago. You mean you've been living with that? Bless your heart. I'm so sorry I did that to you. Listen, don't let this conquer your life. Well, let's move on. We've got to get to this last point here. Commit yourself to your family and your friends. That's real close to home to me. Restore your relationships. I really want to address myself to those of you who are struggling in one way or another in your family. Sometimes I get really wrapped up in the emotion of what I'm wanting to preach, the truth. Please don't misread that. I'm not angry at anybody. I'm not. I just believe these things so deep in my heart. I want to get it in your heart. That's what it's about. Every time I turn on my computer at home, it goes through a really neat process. It goes through this process to make sure that my programs are all working properly. And God in His Word does a very similar thing to that. It's a process not to check to see if our computer software is working properly, but to check whether our personal relationships are working properly. I wonder if it's even possible that we're sitting in here right now in God's house, and you have someone sitting near you or in the same room with you, and you just don't like them. And you're just not willing to give them a chance in your life. I'm sorry for you. Listen, you don't have to wait till invitation time. I'm not asking you to come up here now. I mean, you can anytime you want, but I'm asking you, when God speaks to your heart and you're feeling pressure over this, and you're really ready to get rid of it, then you just need to call out to God, right there where you're at. God doesn't just hear people that come up here and get on their knees. He looks upon the heart, always. He always looks upon the heart. He knows what you're thinking right at this moment. More than that, He knows what you're feeling at this very moment. He goes deeper than that. He knows things that you don't know about yourself, that He knows how to bring up at the right time and the right way. Listen to this verse of Scripture, because we're getting into a sticky thing here. What if you go to a sister or to a brother or to a mom or to a dad or to a fellow church member or whoever, and you go to them and you say, you know what? I know that I really hurt you at this point in time in your life. Do you think you could forgive me? Because I don't want to carry this around. I'm not going to try and justify myself and say you were wrong and I was right. None of that seems to matter very much. I just want a forgiving heart. That's what I want. I don't want any grudges against you at all. I don't want you to cross the street when you see me, or if we're in church together and I put my hand out to shake and I say, there you are, you turn around and go the other way. I want to be able to look at you and say, we're brothers, we're sisters. And I've been forgiven and I forgive you. Listen to this verse of Scripture, Romans 12 and verse 18. It's one we ought to circle, underline, highlight, do anything we can do with it. If it be possible, as much as lieth in you, live peaceably with all men. What he's saying is, as far as it depends upon you, because you could go to somebody and say to them, I want to ask you to forgive me, and they say, forget it. Get out of my face before I bust you right in the mouth. There are people that will do that. That's why I said, as much as is possible. Some relationships might have gone wrong in your life because of what other people have done, and they might well not want that relationship to be restored again. You're on their blacklist. You're never getting off of it. You're going to stay there until eternity ends, and eternity never ends. If it is possible. See, here's what God's really doing here. He's putting the results on himself, not on you. He's just saying, you just obey me and do what I'm telling you to do. So I can say, God has one goal in all of this. Set you free. Set you free. So you can sleep at night. So the best meal in the world doesn't seem something really sour because you're conquered by this thing. As far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. That everything includes the one thing we all probably find most difficult. I know I'm not the only one. To look at your spouse and say, honey, forgive me. I feel bristled when I do that. Do you need to do that with someone? No, I'm not going to have you do it here. I'm not. But you need to do it. You need to get in private where nobody else is around except you and God and them. And you need to say to them, this day, I'm going to be set free. Because I'm not carrying any more grudges. All right, I'm ready to finish this message up. I'm going to give you something from a brilliant writer. His name is Keith Drury. He writes for the Wesleyan Church. In one of his books, he touches on this whole subject of restoring relationships. What he's really talking about here is restitution. It's really interesting. Just listen to this. We'll be done when I do this. This is what he says. Restitution deals with more than property. It is also going back and making things right for hurtful things I've said or done. It's far easier for me to tell you some story than to tell you of the difficult and painful times I've had to ask my wife, my boys, my boss, my friends, my secretary to forgive me. Restitution is asking forgiveness for harsh words, a quick tongue, cutting remarks. It is asking forgiveness from a brother you hurt, a mother you caused heartache to, a former spouse whom you maligned. Restitution is confessing with seeking forgiveness from an old business partner, neighbor, and roommate. It's admitting my past errors and relationships and humbly seeking forgiveness from the one I've hurt. And it's harder to make personal restitution than property restitution. You know what this takes? It takes God in you. That's it. It's really that simple. It takes God in you. Because he's asking you to do something that only he has the power to do. And guess what? God can't do that for you when your sins have not been forgiven by him. Because you and I, we placed his son on a cross. And we drove nails through his hands. We spit in his face. And we mocked him. But he needs to be your Savior. He does. Let's stand together with every head bowed, every eye closed. I know, I want to say this at the beginning of this invitation. Please give me your attention. Not the time to get ready to go. It's only 5 to 12. That's amazing for me, okay? So just 5 to 12. We're doing good. you may not need to come up here at this altar. There's nothing magic about the altar. What's magic is Jesus Christ, who has the power to take grudges away, who has the power to give peace like only He can give, who has power to do for you what He did upon the cross, because He was crucified, and He didn't do anything wrong except to love people. That's what He did wrong. He loved sinners, and He loves you. But you need to make this commitment. When church is over, you're going home, you're picking your phone up, you're going to take that mobile phone that you've got in your car, which you've got some privacy, and you're going to call that person and say, please forgive me for not forgiving you. I want 2014 with a clear heart, clear mind. Let's decide that together. Oh, Father, only You can see into our hearts and our minds. We're glad for that. We really are glad that You're the only one that can see that. But it also causes us to really trust You, because You bring up the things that need to be brought up to deal with this issue. And I pray, Father, that the grudges will be left at an altar. They'll be left here, not taken with them as we go out today. The 2014 will be an amazing year for all of us, because we started the year off right, letting You have full control. Not excusing ourselves for our part and how we've hurt others, but willingly accepting that and recognizing it's under the blood of Christ. And, oh, Father, for that one that does not know Jesus as their Savior, I pray today they'll receive Your forgiveness of their sin and the payment that Your Son made upon the cross of Calvary, shedding His blood so that their sin could be put away. They today can have eternal life by trusting Jesus as their Savior. In His name we pray. Please continue with every head bowed